What's going on, guys? Welcome back to #AskGSM episode 523 here today for Wednesday, December 6, 2023. I am Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great week so far. If you want to send in a question to the show, you can do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Drop a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not in the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. Let's get right into it here. Micah does up from YouTube. Their first question was, do you think Sasha Banks will not sign with AEW, but instead return to WWE, setting up a four horsewomen match at WrestleMania to take on the four members of Damage Control? I think I talked about this because I saw your question when we recorded WrestleRant Radio last week. I think that was on my mind when we discussed that in the clips here on the channel of me and RJ discussing the possibility of Sasha Banks maybe coming back. At this point in time, I think, and it's changed a lot. In the last year, before like mid-December when it became clear that she was indeed leaving WWE and that she wanted to work Wrestle Kingdom, blah, 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 and she ended up showing up there a few weeks later, I was pretty much convinced that she was coming back to WWE at some point. Whether it be in the Royal Rumble or around WrestleMania season, she needed some time away, she'd come back, and that was that. Then it became clear that she was not coming back, that she was indeed gone, and that she wanted to go off and work in New Japan and maybe AEW, and a lot of people thought she would show up on that first Dynamite of the year, or soon after, or around All In. She was at All In. They showed her, sitting in the crowd multiple times throughout the show. So it seemed like there was not a deal in place, but the idea that she would be coming in at some point. That was in August. It seems like she's not completely injury-free as of right now. She might be training to get back in the ring. So we don't know exactly what her status is, so it's not like she's been free and clear this entire time and she just hasn't come in. And that could still happen, and I've always said, even if she does wrestle in AEW, I don't think she needs to sign. I said that even a year ago. I just don't think, not that AEW doesn't need her or couldn't use her, I just don't think that if she were to come in, she would be the saving grace of this division. Would she be the biggest star they've ever signed to that division? Yeah, by a wide margin. But I don't even think star power is enough at this point to bring that division to the next level. It really just comes down to booking. Until Tony Khan can, show that he is going to take women's wrestling as a real priority in that company, I just don't have a lot of faith that someone like a Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné, what have you, will come in and really change the perception of women's wrestling in AEW. She might have the occasional match on Dynamite, but would they start main eventing Dynamite more? Would it really elevate the division? I mean, I guess it's possible, but I thought that with a lot of other women they brought in too, and it just hasn't happened. Now, what they're doing now is not bad. The women's division is not in awful shape. They have a lot of great women in that division. Kris Statlander came in, had a great run as TBS champion. When I say came back from injury. She came back and, had that great run as TBS champion. Julia Hart's really impressing me right now. I think the Toni Storm stuff is some of the best stuff in all of wrestling right now. So it's not like it's a completely dead division. But they could be doing a lot more with the women they have there. I just don't know if Mercedes comes in. Okay, you have a match with Toni Storm. Okay. Saraya, the story of her injuring Saraya 5-6 years ago, that's a possibility. Not really something I guess we necessarily need to see, but because Saraya's not really the performer she once was, that's an option, I suppose. Ruby Soho, I think we saw that in WWE, but you can run it back in AEW. Kris Statlander would be a fresh, fun matchup. Britt Baker when she comes back. So, I mean, again, it's not that I don't want to see her in AEW. I just don't think she should sign there. I just think signing there for any extended period of time, at some point she would probably just go back to feeling like another person. Now, that being said, in WWE, that was kind of the role that she had towards the end of her run there as well, about a year and a half ago. The tag team stuff with Naomi was not bad at all. I mean, they had history. They worked well together. They were trying to elevate that division, but it was never going to work. But even prior to winning the tag team title, she was on TV on and off. They weren't doing fucking jack shit with her. It was just a waste of her time. And I'm not even the biggest Sasha Banks fan in the world. She is a great talent. She is an amazing talent and one of the best in the world, especially in that women's division in any company. They just really weren't doing a lot with her. So if she were to come back to WWE, they would have to show that they were. I'm gonna write a whole article about this actually today for tomorrow for Bleacher Report, so keep an eye out for that. But they would really have to show that they're going to use her differently. When I say this time, I mean I'm talking like just as more of a priority than she was towards the end of her run the last time. She doesn't have to be in the main event of WrestleMania necessarily again, but, doing something of note as opposed to just being on the show. Like, there was like a 4 or 5 month stretch where she got no mic time on TV at all, which is kind of remarkable for someone of Sasha Banks' caliber, who had done stuff like with Star Wars, and, she's not the biggest star in the world, but, a lot more casual fans know who she is than probably most, if not the entire women's division, currently in WWE or AEW. So we'll see. I think there is a pretty decent chance she comes back to WWE. As far as how it would happen, again, I'm going to write all about it tomorrow for Bleacher Report, but I think the Bayley stuff just writes itself. Coming back to bring Bayley back to the light side, reuniting those two as baby faces for the first time in, 4.5 years, 5 years. And, having them work together against Damage Control. I don't think the Damage Control 4 Horsewomen match really makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, Charlotte's currently feuding with them, so that makes sense. But, where does that leave Bianca? Would Bianca just not be at WrestleMania? Would she be doing something else for the championship? And if so, who does that really leave on SmackDown for her to work with? Because Io Sky would be involved in a Damage Control matchup. And then Becky, I think it's pretty clear she's probably on her way to face Rhea Ripley for the Raw Women's Championship. And again, if you do that, what does she do? I've always said Liv Morgan's an option. I don't know if a lot of other people see that as a viable Mania match, but they have history. They work well together. I think Rhea actually was the one who put her on the shelf in storyline a few months ago when Rhea was working with Raquel. So, I mean, I honestly think that could work as a Mania match if Liv's ready to go by WrestleMania. I don't know if she wins the Royal Rumble necessarily. I think people coming in, returning, and winning the Rumble's kind of played out at this point, but that's a possibility. So it's not completely out of the question, but honestly, as cool as that would be, to do an 8-woman tag team match, I think it just means more to do a Bayley singles match at Mania, because the real story there is with her and Io and Dakota. It is with Damage Control, but I just feel like Bayley has gone so long now, and this might be her only one shot, to get a singles match at Mania. She's had a lot of matches at Mania, maybe not triple threats, but she was in the Battle Royal in 2018. She had that 4-way at WrestleMania 33, which she won, but it was a 4-way, not a singles match, when it really should have just been her and Sasha one-on-one at Mania, but they had to get Charlotte on the card, so whatever. That was in 2018. 2019, they lost the tag titles in that fatal 4-way women's tag team match. WrestleMania 36, it was like a multi-person match, I think a 5-way maybe for her championship. 37 she missed, 38 she missed. 39 this year, she was in a 6-woman tag team match. We just saw the tag team thing last year. This would be a different take on it, but I'd rather just see her doing something else in terms of, just an actual meaningful story where she's going for the championship. Because in that scenario, it sounds like the championship, Io would have to lose it to maybe Bianca before then, and who does Bianca face? I don't know. I just feel like it would be better, as cool as that sounds, maybe that works as like an Elimination Chamber match. But Becky is doing her thing on Raw. She might even win the Raw Women's Elimination Chamber to earn an opportunity at Rhea at WrestleMania, because Becky should not win the Rumble, in my opinion. So, but I think a Sasha Banks return to WWE is certainly a possibility. Mike's second question, should Jade Cargill be managed by MVP? I think that'd be a perfect fit, honestly. I wasn't even really thinking about that until you mentioned it here in your question. MVP is literally doing nothing. I don't think we've seen him since SummerSlam when Omos came out for that Battle Royal. I'm not even sure if he was there then. But he's been managing MVP or Omos now for the last year and a half, and it was fine early on, and I thought it was a beneficial pairing to have break Bobby off on his own, make him a babyface, and then Omos as a mouthpiece. It really hasn't done much for Omos. It really has not done much for Omos whatsoever, at all. He's been working with Bobby, and he worked with Rollins and Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman, and all of that stuff was fine. He didn't win any of those matches, though. I think he won one match at WrestleMania Backlash a year and a half ago. He hasn't done shit. Now that they're going to get rid of Omos necessarily, I think they like Omos. He seems like a really nice guy. They can help him with the recruitment program. I know he was a part of their when they went over to, I think it was West Africa or one of those sort of countries. I know he had done a tour over there, helping to recruit new talent and tryouts and stuff like that, which is great. On TV, not that he has no worth. I don't want to be a fucking asshole, but I just am not clamoring to see more of Omos on WWE TV. He has improved, but that doesn't necessarily mean I need to see him on WWE TV. My point is, I think MVP is wasted in that role, if you can even call it that, because we haven't seen him in that role in forever, as Omos's manager. Because Omos isn't on TV, MVP is not on TV. MVP is not getting any younger. I don't know how much longer he'll be in the company. Use him while you have him. He was great in that managerial role for Bobby Lashley for so long. Maybe don't put him back with Bobby, because Bobby's doing his own thing with the Profits. But maybe put him with Jade. I don't know if Jade necessarily needs a manager, because she was doing her own thing in AEW towards the end there. But she is, she's a good enough talker. But I think MVP being with her just kind of adds to the presentation. I didn't like Mark Sterling being with her because he was a fucking goof. And Malcolm Bivens, Stokely Hathaway being with her, I like that pairing. But again, he's kind of a goofy character as well. We need like a serious manager with Jade. And MVP is a serious manager, and he can talk, and he's great. So him being back, recruiting Jade to be his client, I feel like is a win-win, and I would love to see it whenever Jade makes it to WWE full-time, even if it was like an NXT or something like that. Their third question, do you think CM Punk will work the Saudi shows? I do. I don't think anyone is really... Is anyone opposed to working the Saudi shows at this point? Or, like, can't work them? Sami Zayn was against it for so long, and everyone has their own reasons, and a lot of them understandably so. But Sami Zayn ended up going over earlier this year. Kevin Owens did not work those shows out of solidarity for Sami Zayn, but he ended up going over earlier this year. John Cena was against it when that whole journalist thing happened about 5 years ago. He ended up working Saudi. Was it earlier this year? It was definitely this year. I know he worked a solo match a couple weeks ago. I don't know if he worked a Saudi show prior to that point. I don't think he did. I know he was in the first Saudi show at the Greatest Royal Rumble, but other than that, I don't know if he's been on a Saudi show since April of 2018 before Crown Jewel a couple of months ago. So, yeah, I mean, I think everyone ended up working the Saudi shows. I know Punk has said stuff in the past as far as, like, the deal the WWE has with them. Listen, he works for WWE now. He knows this comes with the territory. Now, if he wasn't comfortable in working those shows, then I guess he doesn't necessarily have to. I would think that he probably will, though, for whenever their next Saudi show is. I think right before... Is it before WrestleMania? I know I had seen something about, like, January 27th. That's, like, the fucking Rumble. But, like, around that time, or... I don't know. I had seen something like the Saudi Experience, right? Wasn't there a commercial for that during Survivor Series? I don't know what that was about. They were just there in November. They were just there in early November for Crown Jewel. So I don't know if they would necessarily go back this soon, because they're doing Elimination Chamber in February. They would probably go back in, like, fucking the spring again like they did this year, I would have to imagine. And then we'll probably see him on that show, honestly. If they're paying him this much money, I don't know if he'll be on every pay-per-view, but the bigger Saudi shows, he probably will be on them, unless he's really that much against going, which at this point, no one is, so why would he be an exception? Next question, also from Micah. Do you think an R-Truth serious run could work in WWE, or is it too late? That's a good question. As like a main serious guy, no. I think that honestly we were past that point like 10 years ago. I thought his heel run in 2011 was amazing. It was way too short-lived, but he ended up just becoming too entertaining that they had to turn him babyface. But like he also fucked it up for himself because he got suspended. He still worked Survivor Series, MSG with The Rock and Cena. I think he was suspended prior to that point, but they had him work the pay-per-view and then wrote him off on the next night's Raw. And then he came back as a babyface, and he's been a babyface ever since. And that was when he was doing the little Jimmy stuff and whatever. So, yeah, I don't think it would work, but it would work in this sense. A serious R-Truth run would work if it was like a one more run sympathy type run, where people, like, they have all this respect for R-Truth, people love R-Truth, blah, blah, blah. Where maybe he wants one more real run at going for a mid-card championship or a world championship. He did hold the U.S. championship briefly a few years ago, like at this point 4 or 5 years ago in early 2019. He was still a comedy character at that point, and that wasn't even intentional. I think he won the title by accident, legitimately, which is the most R-Truth thing I've ever heard. When he beat Nakamura for it. I think someone just shared that clip recently, actually, and I just completely forgot about it. But unless it was like a sympathy type thing, then no. But if it was a sympathy thing where it's like, listen, people want to really rally behind him and the idea of him winning a championship one more time, and I'm not talking like the fucking 24/7 title, which is gone anyway, but like a mid-card title, or maybe not like winning the world championship or a world championship, but at least, contending for it, I feel like that could work. Because he still looks the same as they did fucking 15 years ago. And I don't know. I think it could work if done right. Nike only from YouTube, their question was, would a CM Punk and Stone Cold Steve Austin Broken Skull Sessions interview be the biggest interview in wrestling history? I don't know about the biggest interview in wrestling history, but it would be pretty anticipated. I think there's been bigger Steve Austin interviews that he's done in Broken Skull Sessions that would be bigger than a CM Punk one. And the Punk one would be huge, assuming they'd be allowed to go all out. But like even Steve Austin has done 2 bigger interviews, I would say, that would be bigger than a CM Punk one. One with The Undertaker, the first real out-of-character interview that Taker did back in 2019. They ran it back in 2020, and that one was great too. But that first one was a real event to see him out of character, which he had not done up to that point because he was still he was still not full-time with WWE, but like he was still active as a performer. So to see him really come out of character at that point for the first Broken Skull sessions was a big deal. The other bigger interview, I would say, than a Punk one was the first Vince McMahon one 9 years ago. That was a big deal, and a lot of, like, it just really exposed to me how fucking out of touch Vince McMahon is. Like, when you watch it even now, but even then, people were like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, the stuff he said about Punk and Cesaro and all this other sort of stuff, obviously he's never going to be 100% truthful, especially on his own fucking network, but that was a real draw. That was a massive interview. So, like, there's been bigger interviews, I'm sure, in wrestling history that would be bigger than a Punk one. That Vince McMahon one being one of them, just to see him and Stone Cold back in the same area, but also Vince talking about taboo topics he wouldn't typically talk about on a platform like that, and also the Taker one. So, no, it wouldn't be the biggest, but it would be a pretty big deal. They had to bring the show back first. We haven't had a Broken Skull Sessions in over a year, I think. I think he just stopped doing it because he was busy, or I don't know. He just has not done one at all in the last year and a half or so. So hopefully we can bring it back at some point. And maybe they wouldn't have to if Punk ends up working Mania with Steve Austin himself, which I'm still skeptical that's going to happen. But if that's a possibility, they probably wouldn't want them doing an interview before that. Unless that's the setup, which is also possible. They could do a Broken Skull Sessions where, they set it up on that interview and then do their little thing at Mania with the match. So that's also possible too. Christopher L. from Facebook, his first question was, what are some of the biggest booking misfires to happen in pro wrestling in the last 20 years? I'm not good at these type of questions because there's just so many examples that I'm sure aren't coming to mind. But in the last 20 years, I think the first and maybe not the first one, two come to mind from the last 15 years. Bray Wyatt losing to John Cena at WrestleMania, to me, is still one of the dumbest booking decisions ever. And it's not number one because Bray Wyatt still went on to have a great career, multi-time world champion, Hall of Fame worthy career. Hopefully he goes in this upcoming year into the WWE Hall of Fame. Memorable character reinventions, over merchandise seller, blah, blah, blah. Could his career have gone higher had he beaten Cena? Maybe. I still thought it was incredibly dumb then. I still think it's super dumb now that he lost to Cena on that show, when he really should have won. Cena gained nothing from that victory. Regardless of what the win meant for the story, it just accomplished nothing for Cena. So I still think that was one of the dumbest outcomes in recent wrestling history. But even bigger than that was the Nexus thing. When Cena, also involving Cena, when Cena beat the Nexus at SummerSlam 2010, they were just so fucking hot at that point. And even like back then, when I was like, I'm a mark now, obviously, but like, when I wasn't really analyzing the business as much even then, I'm thinking, watching that, why would they do that? Like, that just seems so fucking dumb to have them lose. The Nexus, that is. And they stuck around for a little while after that, but it was just never the same. And I think it cost a lot of those people big runs. Specifically Barrett. Barrett went on to have a lot of success, but not in the same way that Bray Wyatt did. Bray Wyatt, or Wade Barrett, after that program was over, was slotted at a certain level in that company, where not only did he never win a world championship, which he could have around that point, not only did he never win a world title, he never even came close to sniffing one. Like, I can't remember many opportunities he got out of world championship after that. Maybe in like one or two elimination chambers, but that's really about it. And he deserved more than that, in my opinion. So those are two that come to mind. CM Punk losing to Triple H and Night of Champions is still pretty fucking stupid. That's been brought up lately with Punk coming back and now working with Triple H. When Triple H came out of like wrestling retirement, he wasn't retired, but he wasn't full-time at that point. I think it was his first match since Mania, when he lost to Taker at Mania 27. Came back just to beat Punk. And I know Triple H and Punk wasn't the original match for that show. It was Kevin Nash before Kevin Nash had to be pulled from that pay-per-view. And then we never ended up getting Punk and Nash. So Punk never gave Nash his comeuppance for that. I guess Triple H did. Punk didn't, but whatever. It just made no fucking sense because Punk was so hot and they had him lose multiple pay-per-views in a row, mind you. But that being, it wasn't the first one. He got cashed in at SummerSlam, but that was okay, I thought. That Triple H match, him losing, was just so fucking stupid. So those are three that come to mind. I'm trying to think, like you said, 20 years. So that's dating back to like 2003. I guess if you would include it, it's technically over 20 years at this point because it was earlier on in 2003. But Triple H beating Booker at Mania 19. Booker was so... he obviously went on to win a World Heavyweight Championship in WWE, but years later. He was really hot at that point. He probably should have beaten Triple H. And the way they beat Booker T, too, is just dumb. If he was never going to win, then don't have him take the pedigree and sell it for an hour before getting pinned. That made him look so fucking weak. And 2, they were doing that whole like storyline going into that show. Oh, people that look like you don't win world championships. Like this whole fucking racist angle. And he didn't even win. Booker T never really gave Triple H his comeuppance. I don't know if he ever gave him his comeuppance. They had matches after that, and I don't think Booker T won a single fucking one. So, I mean, that was pretty stupid too. I'm trying to think of other like outcomes in the last like 20 years, but those are probably the biggest ones that come to mind. Buy or sell on the worst women's title reign. Nikki Bella in 2015 or Mandy Rose in 2021-2022. Man, it's funny you say that. I actually really enjoyed the Mandy Rose run. I know you had your hot take on Cora Jade last week. This is probably your hot take for this one, because I'm not sure if that's the popular opinion that Mandy Rose's run was really bad at all. Her matches weren't instant classics, but she actually had a couple decent matches during that period. They were not bad matches. She was the best part of that division in Toxic Attraction. She really turned her character around. That was really how she should have been booked on the main roster to begin with, and she never was. At any point in the 5 years she was on Raw and SmackDown, she was never booked in that way. But she worked with a lot of the NXT women, helped them a lot, put them on the map, put over Roxanne in the end after having a year-plus reign as champion, which was cool. So, it's definitely Nikki Bella to me. And even Nikki Bella's run wasn't terrible. It was just at a time where, like, no one gave a fuck about the women's division. So, like, I mean, they had talent at that point, but not a lot of talent. It was really Nikki Bella versus Paige every other week. Her versus AJ Lee early on before AJ Lee left. And after AJ Lee left, it was like Naomi. No one gave a shit at that point. Like, she was barely defending the championship, it felt like, because they just had no women for her to face in either brand. And the brand split wasn't even a thing at that point. They didn't bring it back until 2016. So Charlotte taking it and making it the women's championship months later was really the right way to go. Yeah, easily. Nikki Bella's reign was not the worst thing to ever happen in wrestling, but it was definitely weaker than Mandy Rose's run, to me, which I actually really enjoyed. Speaking of which, your next question, talking about enjoying things, it says, I have thoroughly been enjoying this Chase U scandal storyline, more particularly the usage of JC Jane in a dynamic where she's basically a potential black cloud over the Chase U paradise. How do you feel about the storyline so far, and what do you think is the endgame for it? I think that's exactly it. I think JC Jane is in the group to cause dissension within Chase U, break them up. They'll probably get back on the same page. Chase U's actually exceeded my expectations as an act in terms of they've gotten really over. Shawn Michaels has done right by them. They won the tag titles in a really cool moment. They immediately lost them. I mean, I don't really think they should have won the belts to begin with, but they immediately lost them, and I don't really know if they know where this is going. Like I said, I do think JC Jane is trying to break up the group from the inside, but Thea Hale was already kind of on the outskirts of Chase U. So having her go back in only to take her away again would be weird. Like, is she trying to take Duke Hudson out of the group and have him turn heel on Andre Chase? I'm not sure. So, the whole scandal thing, I mean, it's not really my cup of tea. What they do with Chase U to me is really hit or miss. Some stuff works, some stuff doesn't. They're an act that's over. Shawn Michaels tries with them. They get more TV time than most people on that show. So, and they're not as nearly as bad as they were like a year or two ago with Chase U. The group is what it is. It's a cult act at NXT. They're fan favorites. I don't think it would work on the main roster necessarily, but they're doing what they can with it in NXT. So it's not really my favorite thing on the show, but it's a storyline, and they're trying with it, and we'll see where it goes. Your next question, when do you think the WWE product was at its worst? Great question. He goes on to say, for me, there were two periods where the product was truly the lowest of lows in its existence. The periods of 2009 through 2012 and 2017 through 2019. When we look at the 4-year period of 2009 through 2012, we look at the god-awful Raws with the special guest hosts that thankfully died a death, a horrific women's division, Raw going to 3 hours, idiotic storylines that made no sense, a very thin talent roster, and got nobody over, and the constant forcing of John Cena down the throats of the fans, resulting with ratings going down big. In 2017 through 2019, we had a long period of god-awful Raws, SmackDown going down badly in quality, Jinder Mahal's nightmarish WWE title reign, Brock Lesnar's disgraceful laziness as Raw champion, Seth Rollins' disastrous championship reign, and Roman Reigns' tedious, embarrassing push as top dog of Raw. Both were painful times to be a wrestling fan, but which one did you hate more? Great question, and I agree, I hated both periods. But I'll try to differentiate here. I mean, when you say like ever, you said when is the WWE product been at its worst? I mean, I can't speak to ever because I wasn't watching in like the 90s. So, I mean, I don't know if it was worse. And the periods that you're talking about might be the worst ever. I don't want to debate that. But I don't know how it really compares to like 95, for example. Like when I go back and watch Raws or pay-per-views from that period, it was pretty fucking bad. Like it was really bad. So I don't honestly know which one was worse. People would probably tell you more recently. But anyway, the 09 through 2012 period, it's funny because at that point, again, I wasn't really analyzing the product as much. Definitely not in 09 or 2010. 2011, 2012, I was. Like that was when I started writing about wrestling and talking about it and stuff like that. So I was doing more analyzing, like, oh, that's a bad booking decision and stuff like that. But looking back on it, that honestly might be the worst period. Yeah, that might be the worst period. But specifically 09 and 2010. 2012, I didn't hate as a fan. I enjoyed 2012. Brock came back. Raw going 3 hours was just not a great call, obviously, in retrospect. I didn't hate it at the time. But Raw just was not good for a better part of that second half of the year because it was just so fucking long. But, Jericho came back in 2012. They were doing a lot of cool stuff. CM Punk's year-long reign as WWE champion. I mean, the women's division was in shambles for the most part, and Raw just was not great if you go back and watch it, especially the 3-hour shows. But 2011, too, 2011 was not a great year overall for WWE, but it had two of my favorite feuds of all time, Punk and Cena and Orton and Christian, which took up a better part of the year. So I can't say those 2 years. I probably would go that period, though, because 09 through 2010, it was really what you said initially. The special guest shit at the time wasn't great, but even looking back was just fucking terrible, man. Like a lot of those Raws, they do have some hidden gems with some of the feuds and stories they were telling, but it was like Cena, Orton, Triple H, cycling them in and out. There were no new stars made during that period. And they were trying with like the weirdest people. They tried with Kofi. It was a start and stop thing. They didn't really long-term try to get him over. Vladimir Kozlov was coming around at that time, and he just fucking sucked. I'm trying to think. Jack Swagger they tried with, and that didn't really pan out. There were a lot of people they tried with, and they just were not as... They just didn't pan out for WWE. They didn't really become top acts. That 09-2010 period was just fucking bad, man. And then, like, 2017 through 2019, 2017, same thing. I thought Raw in 2017 wasn't bad. I actually enjoyed Raw in 2017 for the most part. SmackDown was abysmal. After the draft, when Jinder became champion, SmackDown was fucking awful for the better part of that year. But really, to me, the worst years for the product were like 2018 and 2019. That was when it got really bad. Like, the Manias I thought were good, 34 and 35. But like going into the summer and then especially the fall seasons of both the years were just so bad. Like they were, honestly, I might take back what I said. I don't know, actually. Late 2018 and late 2019 were really, really bad. And that was even before COVID. Like, you didn't even mention COVID, because COVID was bad and we had no fans. But, like, there were more stuff probably during those periods I enjoyed more than 2018 and 2019. That's how bad it was at that point. The product was really fucking bad. I might go 09 to 2010, because at least in 2018, 2019, you can go back and watch some of those Raws or SmackDowns or pay-per-views, and the wrestling was at least great. Not a lot of great storylines, but in 09, 2010, you weren't getting a lot of great wrestling. Sometimes, especially when Danielson came in and Punk was doing more stuff, but that was far and few between. A lot of those matches were just same wash, rinse, repeat with Cena, Orton, Batista, and Triple H. Shawn Michaels you can throw in there too. And especially after Mania in 2010, Edge wasn't full-time as much anymore. He was still around, but he was kind of winding down. Jericho left the company. Shawn Michaels retired. Batista left the company. Taker went part-time. Cena was still there full-time. Triple H went part-time. The product was just not good. They lost a lot of stars during that period, and they didn't really replenish the pot until NXT became a thing years later. And it was a really big problem. So I'd probably go 09 through 2010, because I feel like when I go back and watch Raws from those periods, yeah, they're nostalgic because I was still a young fan at the time enjoying the product for what it was, but there's just not a lot to like really watch for, even though the Raws are shorter in 09 and 2010. There's just the product, like there's just nothing there. Like even 08 was great, I thought, overall. But 09 and 2010, like there's just really not a lot. And yeah, you had Shawn Michaels and Taker and stuff. Again, that's like one match. I'm talking the overall product around that point was just not fucking good. 2018, 2019 is really tough to go back and watch, but at least, again, you were getting occasional great matches, and the talent roster, I think they have more talent in 2018, 2019 than they did in 09, 2010, which they had a lot of top stars and notable names, but no one that was really going anywhere or getting beyond a certain level. So that's a great question, though. And his last question, who do you think has more potential as world champion, Dominic Mysterio or Braun Breaker? Definitely Braun Breaker. I mean, Dominic's great, and he obviously is probably going to get more heat than Braun Breaker ever will. But Dominic, just to me, unless something changes, and he's improved a lot, it's just not a world title guy. He can be around for a long time and be a great character, mid-card guy, IC or US champion, even upper mid-card guy. I just don't see him thriving as like a Universal or WWE champion. Maybe for a one-off run like a Jinder type thing, it wouldn't be as bad as that because Jinder sucked. And Dominic isn't awful. But I just think Braun Breaker is the type of guy you want to build your company around. He's young, he can go in the ring, he's got that explosiveness about him, he's got the family legacy behind him as well. He's really improved on his mic skills. He can work as a babyface and a heel. I mean, he could be their next Roman Reigns if they really play their cards correctly. So I got to go Braun Breaker. I think he's just easy choice there by far. At Iwagu91 from Twitter, their first question was, your thoughts on the late Umaga? I loved Umaga. I think Umaga was a big part of the product when I started watching in 2008. He wasn't doing, I mean, that was after he lost the undefeated streak, and he wasn't doing a whole lot, but he was Intercontinental Champion for a period. He was always around on Raw and SmackDown working with various people. For like the first year that I was watching wrestling, he was around a lot. And then when he left, when he left the company, I was disappointed. And then he passed away 6 months later. It was devastating because he was so young. Had he not passed, he probably would have gone to TNA, I imagine. Because a lot of the people like Kennedy, Hogan, like he was on that Hogan tour, I think in Australia that summer. So he probably would have ended up in TNA at some point, if not gone back to WWE at some point down the road. But yeah, Umaga was great. I think he was really honestly ahead of his time in terms of they didn't really know what to do with him after he lost to John Cena at the Rumble in 2007. They had a great feud and a lot of great matches, and the guy was a good worker, but he was just, they kind of typecast him as like this savage Samoan or whatever. And then after he lost to the main event guy, he was never really taken seriously as a, threat to the main event scene after that. So I enjoyed Umaga a lot, and I wish they had done more with him while they had him. Next question of his. Who do you see winning the AEW World Championship off of MJF, Samoa Joe or Wardlow? I just feel like you can't give Joe another shot at the championship and not have him win. Like, then what's the point of even doing it again? I enjoyed their Grand Slam match a lot. I thought they had a great match. Don't run it back if you're not going to have Joe win, especially on pay-per-view. Especially with the storyline injury and real injury that he's probably dealing with, MJF that is. You can't have him beat Joe again. I just wouldn't do it. I feel like that'd be very dumb. Wardlow beating MJF would not be the worst thing. I just don't know if it would be wise to have him go from doing nothing and having his character be stagnant and whatever to then having him win a world championship. I just feel like that's too much too soon. I'm not even sure if Wardlow, I mean, he can be a world champion at some point if they book him properly, but that's like 0 to 100 Jinder Mahal shit. I mean, he was more relevant more recently than Jinder was in 2017, but you can't rush things. Samoa Joe has been ready for a very long time. He hasn't had a world title reign, if we're not counting NXT, since his NXT days. I'm sorry, not his NXT days. I just said I'm not counting the NXT title. Since his TNA days, like 15 years ago. That's fucking ridiculous. I mean, he should have won a world title in WWE beyond the NXT championship. And, I think it should be at World's End. I think he should beat MJF. Absolutely. His next question, your thoughts on the pairing of Austin Theory and Grayson Waller. I saw the tweet from WrestleVotes, actually, the other day, praising the duo, saying they get a lot of high marks backstage. It was only meant to be a temporary thing, where they work so well together. They do. I feel like they have great chemistry. The thing with Theory and Waller is that I enjoy them a lot as a tag team, and maybe at some point they can win the tag team titles. For as much praise as they apparently get backstage, they're not being built up at all. They're literally just there to lose to other people. They were there to lose to LA Knight, and now they're there to lose to Kevin Owens. They're not there to really, and Rey Mysterio as well for a couple weeks there, a couple months ago. They're not really there to be built around. They're just heels for the baby faces to work with and beat. Now, that could change at some point, and I think, honestly, it's probably the best use of both guys. It gives Grayson Waller something to do on the main roster after being called up a few months ago. In theory, I mean, his U.S. title run just fucking ruined any momentum he had, at least towards the end. So this is kind of like a rehab run for him. He hasn't done a tag team thing yet, I don't think, at least not since The Way in NXT, and even then he was a goofy babyface character. He started out as a heel babyface. It's a different character. I think it's the best thing for them both right now, and we'll see if it leads to them winning the tag team titles. I honestly would not be opposed to that. Noob_N_Co TV from Twitter, their first question was, is it just me or are we getting tired of the whole Bianca Belair versus Damage Control storyline? It's been a year and it has destroyed the whole concept about the War Games match. I'm definitely getting John Cena versus Nexus flashbacks. Yeah, man, I talked about this already on WrestleRant Radio. I think it's fucking stupid that you would do a War Games match, have the babyfaces win, no less, and then they just go right back to feuding. Like, what's the point? At least last year, when they did Damage Control inside War Games, they had Becky go on to feud with Damage Control. She wasn't feuding with them at that, but she beat them in War Games. There wasn't any real reason to do Becky Lynch against Damage Control at that point because, she just beat them inside War Games. But it made sense because they hadn't done Becky and Bayley yet. That was a fresh feud, blah, blah, blah. Bianca's been feuding, specifically here in Charlotte, have been feuding with Damage Control for now what feels like forever, even dating back to last year with Bianca. And now they're still feuding coming out of the show. It's the same feud. It's the same storyline. What the fuck is the difference? There's no difference. There's no excusing it. So they really just have to move on from it. I know they're just waiting to get to Bayley and Io, but going back to this feud still with multi-man matches, Charlotte working with Io, and Asuka, and Bianca working with those women as well, it's just fucking lazy. It's lazy. So yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I'm tired of the whole Bianca Damage Control thing. I was a year ago, and I certainly am now as well. Their next question: who will win the men's and women's Iron Survivor challenges at NXT Deadline? For the women's Iron Survivor challenge, I'm going with Tiffany Stratton. I believe a heel might win this. And for the men Iron Survivor challenge match, I'm going Trick Williams because he's extremely over. I think you nailed it right on the head. Trick Williams is my pick for the baby faces as well, or rather for the men's matchup. I think they could have him go for the NXT Championship with Ilya, and maybe Carmelo cost them the opportunity. I could certainly see that in like the first NXT of the year, New Year's Eve, whatever. I think Trick Williams will win his matchup. And then for the women, it's not as predictable. I don't think Lash Legend wins, for starters. I don't think Blair Davenport wins. Who else is in it? I don't know who qualified last night. I haven't watched the NXT yet. I know Tiffany's in it. And Kalani Jordan. I don't think she's winning it either. So I'm going to go Tiffany. I think Tiffany will get another opportunity at the championship. She'll probably lose that. And then I hate to have both Iron Survivor challenges lose this year, but that's probably what's going to happen. And then after she loses the rematch to Lyra, and Lyra gets her win back from Battleground earlier this year, they can move Tiffany onto the main roster maybe, put her in the Women's Rumble, and then on the main roster maybe soon after or after WrestleMania. Bill Meister88 from Twitter, their question was, first question, and last two questions of the episode. Bill says, now that the dust is settled on CM Punk's return, which I've rewatched over 100 times, that's what he said. Me too. Where do you think it ranks in excitement in terms of returns? It's got to be one of the top returns of all time. The WWE. I mean, it just has to be. I mean, I think there's a lot of returns that come to mind. Like when Steve Austin came back from injury, I don't know if you would count that, but that massive reaction on Raw when he helped Mankind win the championship, or at Backlash in 2000, those reactions were fucking crazy. But it's got to be up there, though, because he was gone for so long. Bret Hart's return was great in 2010 because he was gone for so long. That was an emotional moment, reconnecting with Shawn Michaels, burying the hatchet there. Didn't get a great reaction. It got a pretty good reaction, but he didn't go over as well as people probably thought. Because, again, he was gone for longer. It was a PG product at that point. A lot of those fans probably didn't know who he was. But the Punk return was just perfect. And how they executed it at Survivor Series with the reaction in Chicago and him not saying anything, and they just kind of let the moment speak for itself, no commentary. Just incredible. So, and it also was just shocking circumstances. I thought he would be back at some point, just not now. So, yeah, I don't know if it's the best return in WWE history, but it's got to be in the top three. Edge's return from retirement in 2020 is also up there because that was just an emotional moment. People never thought they would see him wrestle again. Steve Austin coming back on a few different occasions. The Rock's return in 2011 and Brock's return in 2012 are also just incredible. The Punk one just hit differently, though. That one just hit differently. So, I don't know if, again, it's the top return of all time. I might be a marker, just biased in saying that, but it's got to be in that conversation. It has to be. I feel like it's got to be on that Mount Rushmore. Even his AEW debut in 2021 is just an amazing pro wrestling pop. I mean, that Survivor Series reaction was a sustained 2-minute pop, if not longer. I mean, they cut it off after 2 minutes, but still, just wild. So, it's got to be up there. It's got to be up there. It's just amazing. Last question of his, is Christian Cage the best heel in the business right now? His work in AEW and TNA has been nothing short of incredible with his heel promos. Why do you think WWE can never get it to work creatively for his solo run? So you asked two questions here. The first one is the best heel in wrestling right now. He might be. I mean, Roman Reigns isn't really around that much. Roman Reigns is obviously just the guy in wrestling in general. but, and he's not around full time. You could count him. Dominic is also a great heel because he just gets great fucking heat all the time. He just gets amazing heat. I gotta go Christian, though, because he can go in the ring. Not that Dominic can't, but Christian can have great matches at this point in his career. No one thought he would be in this spot, let alone wrestling a couple years ago. The promos have been amazing. He's an amazing heel. He's a great babyface, but he's an even better heel. So he's probably the best heel in the business right now. Yeah, I would probably say that, actually, from all the products I watch anyway. And as far as WWE not being able to get it together creatively, now, listen, I was disappointed that he didn't go back to WWE in 2021. I wanted him and Edge to reunite, which I guess we're getting now in AEW. I wanted that in WWE a few years ago when he came back in the Rumble. In retrospect, he made the right call, because I feel like he either wouldn't be in WWE anymore if he was still there now, or they would have quickly not known what to do with him, especially under Vince McMahon, because he was an older guy. They didn't really do much with Christian when he was active 10 years ago, let alone 10 years later when he's an older guy and they don't see him as a main event performer. He probably would just be in the mid-card if not doing main event shit, which is a fucking waste of Christian Cage. So him going to AEW, although they weren't doing a lot with him for about a year stretch, which really pissed me off. He was like a manager for a while for Jungle Boy, which was fine early on, but it lasted just way too fucking long. After that, he's just really been killing it since the heel turn, since last year. So, and his matches are still great. He's had a lot of great matches this year as well. He's been one of the MVPs of the wrestling business, specifically AEW, in 2023, absolutely. MJF was up there as well as far as being one of the best heels, but he went babyface, so I'd have to go Christian Cage. WWE just never really saw him in that light. I know he was doing the World Champion stuff in 2011, but those reigns were never really booked well. The storyline was, but the reigns weren't booked well. He was never really a threat. He was in chicken shit heel. He didn't hold the belt for very long. He was a good hand to have in the ring in WWE's eyes, probably in the eyes of Vince McMahon. We've all heard the stories that Vince didn't like his face. He didn't like how he looked, and he probably appreciated him as a performer and what he could do, but he never saw him beyond a certain level. That was the case in the mid-2000s. That was the case in the 2010s. And that would have been the case had he come back in early 2020 or 2021 or whatever. So him going to AEW is probably the best choice. I would love to see him have this sort of run in WWE. He can't talk about like the dead. I doubt he ever covers the fucking dead father stuff in WWE. In AEW, he just has the leash let off in terms of what he can say and do. But it's also not like it is over the line to a certain degree, but not like to a great extent. Like he's not talking about, oh, Eddie's not in heaven, he's in hell. Like, I guess he was kind of saying that about Jax Perry's father and stuff like that, and Darby Allin's dad, but I don't know. We've never seen those people in AEW. Like, Eddie Guerrero was like a beloved figure, and now he's talking about him being in hell. That was kind of distasteful right after he died. I wasn't a big fan. I mean, I wasn't watching at that time, but like, kind of the same thing. It's just kind of uncomfortable. It's just weird. So, at least in AEW, I don't really get those uncomfortable vibes from his promos. I don't think he'd be allowed to do them in WWE, which is probably why it works so well in AEW. But Christian's amazing, man. He's always been one of my favorites for the last 12, 13 years, and I'm glad he's finally getting his just due. And that's going to do it, guys, for today's edition of #AskGSM, episode 523, December 6, 2023. Thank you guys so much for checking out the show, per usual. I appreciate it. Be sure to send in a question if you have one by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Drop a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, even if it's late, if not on the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below on the comment section on this very video, and I'll include your question in next week's edition. Have an awesome one, guys. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll catch you on the holiday season shows in the coming weeks here on #AskGSM and elsewhere. Have an awesome one, guys. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.